You ever get that feeling like the ground just shifted, like nothing will ever be the same?
No.
That's what it was like in Israel on October 7th, 2023.
Mm.
This wasn't just another attack. This was like rewriting the rules,
All right.
exposing all those vulnerabilities,
Right.
the ones no one wanted to admit were there.
Well, I think what's so striking is that Hamas, they didn't just inflict casualties. It was a psychological victory, too. You
Yeah.
know, they shook the foundations of Israel's sense of security, like at its core.
Over 1,200 people gone.
Yeah.
Almost 250 hostages. But it's beyond even those horrific numbers.
Right.
It was how it happened
Exactly.
that sent these shockwaves through the entire nation. The audacity of it, the planning,
Yeah.
the sheer scale.
It challenged everything they thought they knew.
Yeah.
You know, this belief that their intelligence, their military, it was impenetrable.
Right.
And then the fallout, it wasn't just about like rebuilding buildings and stuff. It was about trust.
Right.
Trust within the military, the government, the nation, everything.
And that's where things get really, really interesting. We saw this cascade of resignations. Starts at the very top.
Yeah.
Herzi Halevi, the chief of staff. I mean, we're not talking about some, junior figurehead here.
No, this wasn't just, one person falling on their sword,
Yeah.
This was a system
Yeah.
trying to come to grips with how massive this failure was. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
He was basically admitting that the military, the one he led, they weren't ready for this.
And it wasn't just him either.
No.
Southern Command head Finkelman,
Aaron Fickelman, yeah.
he stepped down too.
Mm-hmm.
Was this just purely about accountability, or was there more to it?
Well, yeah, on the surface, sure.
Mm.
Acknowledging the intelligence failures, the operational failures, all of it.
Mm-hmm.
But look, if you dig a little deeper, you see the pressure.
Yeah.
I mean, these leaders, they were facing it from both sides.
Yeah.
Public and the political establishment. I mean, everyone.
So it was both kind of pushing them.
It was this overwhelming sense that something had to change.
Heads had to roll.
Exactly.
And those resignations, dramatic as they were
seen as necessary.
Yeah.
Like the first step to getting back some of that public confidence.
Okay, so let's rewind a little bit. Let's break down what went wrong with the intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Were there warnings they ignored? Or was it more like a failure to connect the dots?
It seems like it was a combination. See, intelligence, it's not just about gathering information.
Right.
It's about what you do with it.
Analyzing it.
Exactly. Analyzing it, understanding it, seeing the patterns, what's coming next.
Anticipating.
And it seems like there were some missteps, some pretty critical ones.
Like what? Were there specific reports that, I don't know, should have raised red flags?
Well, there's been talk of a specific report.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it suggested Hamas was planning something big, but either it didn't get to the right people or, maybe it got to them but wasn't taken seriously.
Mm-hmm.
It shows you the danger of, those silos.
Sure.
In intelligence agencies, different departments.
Not talking to each other.
Exactly.
So you've got different pieces of the puzzle, but no one's putting it together to see the full picture.
And then there's the human element.
Oh, right.
Intelligence analysis, it's judgments, it's interpreting data that's not always clear.
Yeah.
And sometimes those judgments, well, they're wrong.
And in this case.
Those wrong judgments.
Yeah.
Devastating consequences.
It's easy to get caught up in all the strategic details and the tactics.
Mm-hmm.
But we can't forget that these failures, real people paid the price.
Real people, real families.
Lives were lost.
Shattered.
A whole nation left reeling.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We have to keep that in mind as we go through all this.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about the impact at home in Israel. How did people react to the attack, the resignations, all of it? I imagine a lot of anger, fear.
Oh, definitely.
But was there any support for the leaders who stepped down?
It was complex. There was this feeling of betrayal, like the government,
failed to protect them.
Yeah, but there was also this understanding.
Oh, interesting.
That these leaders, they were taking responsibility.
So like a mix of emotions.
Yeah, anger, empathy, a real mix. And that's where you start to see those divisions,
Oh, right. Within Israeli society.
They become even more pronounced.
Because of this?
Yeah, some people, they saw the resignations as weakness, like this is going to embolden their enemies.
Oh, wow.
Right. But others, they saw it as necessary. Accountability. a chance to rebuild, to be more transparent.
Yeah, more responsive.
Exactly.
It sounds like this event really highlighted those fundamental differences
It did.
within Israel.
It played out in the political arena, too. Think about it.
Yeah.
The government, under immense pressure to provide answers, solutions, but the coalition's fragile.
Yeah.
There's all these competing ideologies.
So finding a unified response.
Incredibly challenging.
So even with this national crisis.
The infighting continued.
Wow.
That shows you how hard it is to navigate something like this.
Yeah.
There's no easy answer, no quick fix. This debate about how to move forward, security versus accountability,
Right.
it's going to continue.
Okay, so internally, it's this mix of emotions, political division. But what about internationally? How did this play out on the world stage?
The world was watching, and there was concern, but also support.
Okay.
Allies, like the United States, they expressed solidarity, but they also, started asking questions about the intelligence sharing, the security cooperation.
I bet there were some tough conversations.
Oh, I'm sure. Because at this incident, it didn't just raise concerns about Israel's defense.
Right.
It had implications for, for the whole region.
Right.
Middle East, it's a powder keg. And events like this.
They can have a ripple effect.
Exactly.
And speaking of ripple effects,
Yeah.
how do you think this was seen by Israel's adversary?
Well, groups like Hamas, Hezbollah,
Yeah.
they saw this as a win, not just tactically, but, propaganda-wise, too.
Right, right.
A chance to show off what they can do.
Yeah.
To undermine Israel's image.
That image of invincibility.
Exactly.
So emboldened them, maybe even shifted the balance of power a little.
It's possible. And that's what makes this so significant. This wasn't just an attack.
Yeah.
It exposed these deep vulnerabilities. And it forced Israel and the world to face some really tough truths about conflict in the 21st century.
All right, so we've talked about the problem, the fallout, the anxieties.
Yeah.
But before we get into potential solutions, I want to pause here and ask you, the listener, what's standing out to you? What surprises you? What makes you want to know more?
It's important to remember that while we're looking at this strategically, it's a human story at its heart.
Yes.
It's a story about loss, about resilience, and about searching for answers in a world that feels, well, uncertain.
Yeah.
Hold on to that human element as we continue this deep dive.
Yeah, it's easy to forget that when we're talking about, geopolitics and strategy.
Right.
But you're right. At the heart of it, it's people, real people whose lives are changed forever.
Exactly.
And it's not just their physical security, right? It's this feeling of
Like a national introspection?
yeah, like Israel's looking in the mirror, and
Yeah.
asking these tough questions about who they are.
For decades, their narrative has been this strength, this resilience.
Right, almost invincibility.
And this attack, it pierced through that. It forced them to reevaluate,
Assumptions about security, about defense.
about what it even means to be Israeli.
So it's not just rebuilding walls, it's rebuilding
A psyche.
Yeah.
A national psyche.
that's been fundamentally shaken.
And that's where it gets even more complex.
Yeah.
Because this introspection, it also exposed these divisions,
Oh, right, the ones we talked about before.
these fault lines that were always there. But now, with this crisis,
But they're getting wider.
yeah, they're widening.
What kind of divisions are we talking? Political mainly, or is it deeper than that?
It's both. You've got that classic ideological split.
Right, the hawks and the doves.
Exactly. Those who want a strong military response and those who want diplomacy, dialogue.
The age-old question: can you really have peace through strength alone?
Right. Or do you need something more to win hearts and minds?
Yeah.
But it goes beyond that. Even within those groups, there are disagreements.
Oh, interesting.
Like even those who support a military response, some want targeted strikes, some want a full-blown invasion.
And those divisions, they're reflected in the government too.
Absolutely. This crisis, it puts so much pressure on the ruling coalition.
Which was already pretty fragile, right?
Yeah, exactly. And now you've got these factions all vying for power, pushing their own agendas.
Making it harder to present a unified front.
It's a minefield, a political minefield.
So it's not just about military strategy, it's about navigating all that political.
It's about leadership.
Yeah.
Finding a way to address those security concerns.
Right, because those are real.
They are real, but
Right.
they also need to bridge those divisions. It's a balancing act.
One that takes a lot of
Vacuuming.
Yeah.
And compromise. Something we haven't seen much of lately.
Okay, so you've got all this happening internally, but let's zoom out a little. Big picture now.
Okay.
What are the long-term implications of this attack? How does this reshape Israel?
It could be a turning point, forcing them to really rethink their strategy.
Because for years it's been about deterrence,
Exactly, Project Strength.
military strength,
Right.
to discourage attacks. But
It didn't work this time.
so what? A complete overhaul of their security?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Too early. But there's this sense that the old ways,
They're not enough anymore.
not anymore.
So what changes specifically? Like what might we see?
Well, some argue for even more military power, more technology,
Like what? Give me an example.
AI-driven defense systems. Think drones, but not just patrolling,
Yeah.
analyzing data, predicting threats in real time.
That's taking peace through strengths to a whole new level.
Right. But then there's the other side.
Okay.
Those who say, military alone isn't enough, you need a more nuanced approach. Defense, yes, but diplomacy too, addressing the root causes.
So economic development, education, all that.
Exactly. Investing in people. Because if they have a stake in peace,
They're less likely to resort to violence.
right, it's a pretty big shift in thinking.
Is there support for that within Israel?
It's growing, but it faces opposition. Those who see compromise as weakness.
So Israel's at this crossroads, trying to figure out like who they are, how to be safe.
In a very different world.
Exactly. But, what about everyone else, the international community?
Oh, yeah.
What can they do to help?
Well, practically speaking, intelligence sharing, security cooperation, that's crucial.
Allies like the U.S.
Providing support, technology, resources.
But beyond that.
We have to recognize this isn't just Israel's problem.
Right.
It's a regional problem, a global problem.
In what sense? How is this attack connected to the bigger picture?
We're so interconnected now. Instability anywhere.
Affects everyone.
Exactly. Extremism, weapons, distrust.
Yeah.
These are challenges that need a collective response.
So it's not enough to just help Israel defend itself.
No.
We have to look at like the underlying reasons for conflict.
The root causes. And that takes a lot. Diplomacy, development, humanitarian aid.
Stronger institutions.
It's complex,
Yeah.
but necessary.
If we want a more peaceful world.
So for our listener who might be feeling a little overwhelmed right now,
Yeah.
what's the one thing you want them to take away from all this? I want them to remember this. This attack, it was a tragedy, a wake-up call.
Yeah.
But it's also an opportunity for Israel to rethink its priorities,
Yeah.
for the world to come together, address those root causes, and for all of us as individuals
Yeah.
to talk to each other,
Yeah.
to work towards a better future, a more just, more peaceful world.
Finding opportunity in the midst of tragedy, like you said, tall order. But I think you've really shown why this matters to everyone, not just Israel, because it makes us look at the world,
The world we live in.
Yeah, where those lines between local and global, they're just
Blurred.
Yeah.
And it brings us to another point.
Okay.
This balance between military power and democratic accountability. This crisis really showed that tension in Israel.
We were talking before about how some saw those resignations as weakness, but couldn't you argue it's actually like the opposite, a sign of strength?
How so?
Well, because their democracy allowed it in other countries.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Leaders would just hold on, right?
Wow.
Deflect, silence anyone who disagreed. But in Israel,
They stepped down.
yeah,
They admitted their failures.
and they let the people decide.
It's accountability, showing that even with this crisis, democracy still matters.
But it also brings up some questions about the future. Like, how does this change things?
Between the military and the government.
Yeah. Will there be more oversight now? More transparency?
It's like this attack, it didn't just expose their defenses, but
Their political system.
exactly.
Mm.
And how they fix that, it'll determine not just, their safety, but who they are as a democracy. It's a tough balance.
But an important one, especially in a world where the threats are so
Complex. The
As-
stakes so high.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we've covered a lot: the attack, the resignations, the fallout, the anxieties, the opportunities. What's the one thing you want our listener to remember from all of this? What's the message you want them to carry with them?
Don't be complacent. The world is changing fast. And the way we think about, security, conflict, our place in it all.
It might not get enough anymore.
It might not.
Yeah.
We have to be willing to question what we think we know,
Yeah.
to have those hard conversations, to look for different viewpoints,
Yeah.
and to work together to build something better.
It's a call to action. We all have a part to play.
Exactly. This event, it might seem far away to some,
Right.
but it shows us we're all connected. What happens somewhere else, it affects us all. And it's through understanding, empathy, that we can build a better future.
So to our listener, we say this: stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged.
The future's not written yet. It's up to all of us.
It's up to all of us.